So first of all, we have Nadra Ahmed, who is the chair of the National Care Association. Nadra's been chairman since 2021, so a wealth of information. She served on various government task forces and continues to do so. And during COVID, she was recognised as the respected voice of social care. So we're delighted to have her with us today. She's Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Kent and a Kent Ambassador, and has served as the High Sheriff of Kent in 2023-24, which is a royal appointment. You know what they say about ask a busy woman? I think Nadra is probably that busy woman. She's driven by a desire to ensure the delivery of quality services to the most vulnerable members of our society, and works across a number of government departments which have an impact on the social care world, giving advice and expert advice to parliamentarians. So Nadra, we're delighted that you're joining us, and we look forward to your address. And you'll be followed then by Caroline Abrahams and Rachel Powers, and then we'll open the floor to discussion. So Nadra, I hand the floor to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting me, conference. To be followed by Caroline Abrahams is always a bit of a worry, as she's the font of all knowledge as well. But I'll just start by saying I have been listening to some of the debates, and it's been absolutely fascinating. The introduction to an organisation like yours. It's just great for me to have been able to spend some of the time listening as well. The challenges of social care. I mean, this is a topic that we could probably speak for just on its own for at least half the day, and I recognise and thank you for your recognition earlier on about the challenges, and I also recognise some of the comments that were made about how challenging it is for you as an individual. And I have to say, from my perspective, I was a provider for about 20 years, and then came into the representative role. But I then became a carer when both my parents became ill, one with Parkinsonian Lewy body dementia, and the other at the age of 94, independent, and it was COVID that kind of really had the impact on his mental health. And it was followed by me becoming that carer and recognising how broken the system really is as we went forward. But the three things I just want to kind of touch on, which will probably resonate with many of you already, is we face some really challenging times. I've heard providers recently, since the announcement of the increases in the NI and the lowering of the threshold for providers, I have worked with many of them. We had about 90 on a call the other day, and they're all saying this is worse than COVID because it's absolutely going to devastate their kind of business models. So that I'll touch on a little bit if I have time at the end, but Providers Unite has been set up really just to talk about that, writing to the Chancellor about the funding gaps. But the most important thing in our sector is the value and the recognition of our workforce. The workforce is the key. Without the workforce, we can't do anything. And we know that the challenge we face with having a confident and a competent workforce will be the answer to us getting through some of the most difficult times. And our workforce deals with people with learning disabilities, with older people's services, with mental health. So it is across the board. I always talk about social care as being one of these patchwork quilts of services, which many people don't recognise. And I know today you wanted me to concentrate on the older people's services, and that is a key part of it. We need to be talking about the image of social care. Why does it have such a poor image, which then doesn't support us to be able to recruit and, more importantly, retain We need to retain that workforce, and in order to do that, we need them to have a career pathway in which they can work with us and actually see themselves being recognised as professionals. It doesn't matter how much we say, how much we value them. It is that recognition out in the big world that we operate in. And during COVID, we almost had to force the then Secretary of State to include the social care workforce into the CLAP. And of course, after that, nothing much has happened. So we are seen as a sector that is delivering a critical service, but actually not valued for doing so. And it wouldn't surprise you if I said to you that the NHS is heavily reliant on our ability to support people when they no longer have the right to reside in a care setting, in a hospital setting, and they do need to come out. But if we don't have the workforce, we're not able to deliver that. And so at this moment in time, we've got 130,000 vacancies in our sector. We're not able to recruit levels that we want to. We don't have a strategy. The government hasn't been able to bring about a workforce strategy for social care. They have one for the NHS. And for some reason, that just doesn't seem to have happened over the past couple of decades. So the workforce is the key. We've had to recruit people, international colleagues to come across to us, but this is a world problem. This is not just in England. So I see it all over the place. I also sit on the board of Common Age, which is a Commonwealth charity that looks after the ageing population across the Commonwealth. And we have exactly the same problems in all parts of the Commonwealth as well. So I know this is not an issue just in England. It is a much wider issue. And the ageing population, it goes across the whole of the country. The other issue that I wanted to just touch on was about regulation. Now, regulation is a key part of the quality standards being met for each provider. We pay a registration fee, so we fund the regulator. We've been badly let down by that regulator for a considerable amount of time, and we are now in a period of recovery for the regulator. Now, the reason that is important is that the public need to understand when they're going into a service, if there's a report, how relevant that report is, how important that report is, and how they can then make decisions based on that report. And when you have the newly appointed Secretary of State actually come out and say, well, take it with a pinch of salt, you know there's something really badly wrong with the regulator. So we do need to be thinking very carefully about how that recovery happens. We as providers want an independent regulator. Responsible providers will be saying all the time that they want a regulator to come in because they want it reaffirmed. And if something goes wrong and it's pointed out, they have the right to put it right. And if they don't put it right, then they need to be close to it, depending on what the service is. You can get a requires improvement. I hear this argument a lot. You get a requires improvement for somebody who's missed a medication tick. Well, that medication tick is crucial when you do an audit. So we can't minimize anything. They're there for a reason, but if they're not doing their job properly, and we've had some really quite frightening accounts of a regulator turning up at the door with no compassion for the provider. One of them was actually going to the funeral of his grandmother. They'd been in the home and been looked after. And he called me on a Saturday morning and he was absolutely mortified because the regulator turned up. And they explained that the home was in a bit of a challenge, that they were going to a funeral, and the regulator just stood at the doorstep and said, we'll wait in the car till you get back. And that there's no empathy there of how our services work, because those, a death in our care service affects every member of staff. So if it's a member of, if it's somebody who they've got a personal relationship with, that's even harder. The funding challenge is the one that is going to impact all of the things that we're talking about. We have this enormous challenge. We've got a deficit of somewhere around 8.4 billion in the way that we're funded. So I think it was mentioned earlier in the day today, you know, the funding comes through local authority route. So it's given to the local authorities and they all handle it in their own way. We are currently in the round for next year on to what the increases might look like. We're being told it's by quite a lot of the providers that are on the calls with me are saying that they're being told it'll be between 0% and 2%. When you've got a national increase, which is closer to 10%, which includes the national living wage, which we absolutely welcome, that has to be welcomed because we want our workforce to be paid better. We want them to be valued, but we then have to also be funded in order to make sure that we can be viable as services. So we are spending quite a lot of time worrying about this. We had one provider who's got 300 staff saying that his bill will go up by $250,000 and he's got no way of knowing where that funding will come from. And what I have to say is that one of the things that has really challenged my thinking in the last few days has been around the people who privately fund and how this is going to impact on them. And I think they're often forgotten, but I know that people like Caroline will be talking about that as well. But for me, that is a real worry. We've got private funded people in our care services, and you can't keep putting prices up consistently because actually it's a bit of a vicious circle. They'll go through their funds quicker and they'll end up potentially back with the local authorities. And local authority funding, just for information, to a care provider average is about £700 a week. And that's for looking after somebody with dementia 24/7. That's the kind of figure that the care provider. I represent small to medium-sized providers. I know people will know some of the larger providers who will be being charged, will be charging much more than that. But I'm talking about the average. 84% of the sector is small to medium-sized care providers. And they'll be in every community, and people in villages are working in those services in towns. So that's the bit of the sector that I represent. Now that's how £700 works out about just over £4 an hour. Is that how you value social care? Something that is actually the infrastructure of every community. A GP will be reliant on us. We need district nurses to be supporting us. We need physiotherapists, everybody to be supporting one person. So the NHS is the place where you go to for your acute care health needs. They will help save your life, but it's social care that will help you live your life. That's what we've got to do. That's our role, is to help you live it to the best possible way that we can. We're there to support you. When I was a provider, I could see, families really struggle. And sometimes we do end up with a bit of a social worker role with families as well. And I had it, which was quite strange, because when my father had to go into a care home, he was adamant he was never going to go into a care home. But in the end, he himself was saying, I want to go to a care home, because they wouldn't discharge him out of hospital into his own home. And he went into a care home. And the guilt that I felt as a daughter was just there, and everybody feels it. But it's looking at what's best for the individual. And if being cared for in their own home is the way, then we must get it right. You can't cut corners on things like that. One call for an hour a day is going to mean that somebody sees somebody only for that 1 hour, and the 23 hours after that they're on their own. How are they going to manage that? I hear a lot about technology. Do stop me when you want me to stop, because I could go on. When we talk about technology, I'm great with technology, and I was at an event in the Commons yesterday about technology and the launch of technology, and everybody has a mobile phone, so we've all come to it, and we all do. We all use apps. We might have banking, and I was trying to explain to people that yes, we do need technology, and it will help. But whenever I talk to an older person in a care setting or in their own homes, that face, that familiar face, that smile, that touch, that's what they talk about. The fact that they want somebody to come and see them. And that's a key bit here that we must think very carefully about. I'm also terrified that if we had a cyber attack on our services and we lost all the data, we wouldn't know we wouldn't know what we were doing if we were just wholly reliant on that. So I think we've got to talk about technology in the right way, because it will help. Of course, it will help. But we also have to think about when people are at their lowest, when, you know, these months are dreadful for older people living in their own services. They are for anybody, for learning disability services. We try and get our people out into town or something, just for them to be able to use their energies up. For an older person, that becomes really challenging. And so we've got to think about all of these things, and we talk about the challenges for social care. But the one thing that's really important is these are challenges, so they come with opportunities. The opportunity for everybody to have a say in this. We've got the NHS conversation going on at the moment. And, you know, I've had conversations with ministerial teams saying, when's ours? You know, when are we going to have the conversation about social care? We need that. We need that passion so that people can talk about it. And Providers Unite, which we've formed really just to get people to sign up to say that please think about social care. The Treasury holds that purse. We need that funding, and the figures have been worked out, and they're in the billions is what we need just to meet the current challenge. Forget the 8.4. So I think there are challenges, but the opportunities are there. And the most important thing is we must fight for social care, because nobody knows at what point of our lives we might be needing that social care. And it is, for those who know, they know that it's a critical support. And that's what drives me on a daily basis. And I'm really happy to answer any questions should they arise. Thank you.